Hey everyone, it's Jason from OddAudio here, and today I have a Nakamichi CR3, which is going to serve as two lessons. One, how do we properly calibrate a tape deck, and the most thorough and accurate way of doing so. And two, why are Nakamichis unequivocally better than any other tape deck? And I will die on that hill. I am one of those guys, and I'm going to show you some of the features that distinguish even, I would consider this a basic Nakamichi. It is a three head, but it is one of their later, less expensive models from the 90s. It's using the Sankyo transport, which was sourced from Sankyo rather than made in-house by Nakamichi. But it did have a number of modifications done specifically by Nakamichi. They're not shared with other tape decks using the same transport. So let's start with what you need to do this process. Now, I'm going to note something. I have brought this deck in and I have checked the basic function, but I've not done any of the calibration yet. This is as I've received it. So I know it works and it's playing, but I know also that odds are it's going to need some adjustment. So we're going to go through the process together. So what do you need to do it? First of all, you need calibration tapes. These are step one. So these are from Peebles Engineering, and you can get these on eBay. I believe he just lists them under Nakamichi tape calibration tapes, and they're excellent. I have been using these for years. I buy multiples of them because they do wear out over time, and you have to periodically get new ones. They're always bang on, perfect quality. This is what I use for everything. So, that's step one. A set of these is about, I think he charges $75 US for the pair. And these two tapes have all of the test tones and levels that we're going to need. They're specific to Nakamichi, but it applies pretty much to any tape deck. So you have 3 kilohertz for your speed adjustment. You have 400 hertz for your level and VU meter adjustment. You have 15 kilohertz for your azimuth adjustment. And you have 1 kilohertz for track alignment, which is also the head height adjustment. So we're going to start with the speed as the most critical thing to begin with. Is that, our capstan speed needs to be correct. And as part of this, so this is the first step of what you need. The second step is the more complicated one. You need a 2-channel oscilloscope, and you need if it's not built into the deck already, a sine wave generator. And in this case, this is an HP distortion analyzer, which has a sine wave output on it. So that's what I'm using as my source. So on the scope, I am monitoring both channels. You can see the RCAs, they're just going straight to the outputs. And I am going to be watching the amplitude on here. It's a quick way to check for distortion as well, or cutout, but I'm going to show you why this is important. Because if you look through the service manuals and stuff, they just tell you to go by like the VU meters, which is okay if you're in a pinch, but it's not that accurate. And I'm going to show you why in a second, particularly when it comes to aligning the heads. So first off, what are we doing? Well, if we look here, here's the first reason why a Nakamichi is better. If you see here, this is our playback head. This is our record head. They're separate. When on everybody else's tape deck that is a 3-head unit, these are together. They're in a monolithic unit where, yes, there's 2 heads, but they are in one physical body. And these white gears that you see on the front, these are individual adjustments. On this side are for the playback head, and on this side are for the record head. I can adjust them individually. Not only that, this one adjusts the azimuth of each head, same on the back here. And azimuth, if we're looking at the head from the top, the azimuth is this. It's the movement of the head kind of around its axis. Everybody has an azimuth adjustment. What Nakamichi does that nobody else does is you also have a height adjustment. That's what these two on the middle are. Now, height you would think means up and down, but in fact, it's not. If again, we say we're looking at the head from the top, so this was azimuth, this is height. So we're adjusting the head in two axes, and we're adjusting the playback head and the record head individually. Now, this whole process, we have to start with the playback head because the playback head needs to be aligned. Then we can adjust the record head to suit. So we're going to start with our speed adjustment. So 3 kilohertz tone. And just hit play, and we're going to look at the scope. And right away, I can see it's slightly fast. If you look up in here in the top corner, that's my frequency reading. And I know that it'll always waver a little bit, but I should be seeing 2.99 to 3.01 on this scope, which is pretty much bang on. I've confirmed that with actual counters, but you know, it's good enough. So we go to the back of the capstan motor. There's a little rubber kind of plug cut away, and we can slide our tool in there, and it's a good idea to use a ceramic or plastic tool so that it doesn't short on anything. And if you look closely, I'm going to adjust. So there, I'm slowing it down. And yeah, right about there where it's bouncing between 299 and 301, I know that's where I want to be. So that's step one. And you can see right away, we've actually got a pretty decent alignment here. The amplitude is pretty much the same between the two channels, and there's not much phase difference between them. They're almost perfectly overlapped. So I know just from seeing that, the heads are in pretty good alignment, but we still go through the process. So take this out. Now we're going to go to our 1 kilohertz track alignment, and we're going to be adjusting this guy, the head height adjustment. So again, play, and like so I'm going to show you. It's right, the one in the middle here is the one we need to adjust. And I'm going to show you on the scoop what happens when I play with this. If I can get it lined up. So right now, you can see it's pretty good. What happens if I start messing with it? Oh, look, the phase shifts. And you can see the amplitude change. So what we're looking for is that. We want a perfect overlap between the two channels, so they look like one wave. I'm going to screw it up again. This is typically what you're going to see, where the two channels are slightly out of phase with each other. So that is, again, the height adjustment that we're setting, and that's a 1 kilohertz tone. So let me just get this back where it needs to go. So right there, perfect. It looks like a single waveform. Cool. So next, we're going to do the azimuth adjustment, and that's the 15 kilohertz tone. It's also at a lower level. It's at minus 20 dB. So that is this adjustment here, and I can see on the scope it's off by a fair bit. So right now you can barely see the waveform. I'm going to adjust it, and then all of a sudden, you'll see it. And again, you're looking to maximize the amplitude and get it overlapping. So the phase is the same. I'm just going to adjust so you can see it a bit better. And it's normal. You can kind of see that it sort of is going, sort of shifting back and forth slightly. That's totally fine. Get it as close as you can, but that's pretty good right there. So that's your azimuth adjustment. And once you've done both of those, your head is good. If you really want to be picky, you can go back and forth between those adjustments a couple of times, but there's not a lot in it. Like once you've adjusted the height and then the azimuth, it's bang on. So that's the playback adjustment. Done. Easy. That is literally it. But I like to do some electrical adjustments as well. I think it's going to be okay on this one, but for that we go to our 400 hertz, and this is specifically at 0 dB on the Nakamichi scale. And there's a little bit of debate there. It's dBm, so that's 0.775 volts AC RMS. The electrical guys will know that there's different dB scales, but that's what this specifically is. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to check. Yeah, it's bang on as far as the VU meter says, and also bang on as far as the output level says. So same as with the 1 kilohertz tone, we want to see it overlapping and be the same amplitude. I'll screw it up on purpose just to show you if I can remember now. So that's the meter. This is high frequency. Okay, so we should be able to see it if I screw up the playback level. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Hang on. Meter, here we go. Playback level, which is adjustable on both channels. So, whoops, now we get an imbalance. And this is not uncommon. You'll see this a lot of times. So you're going to adjust until they are perfectly overlapping, like so. And then double check that, yeah, your meter is reading exactly 0 dB on both channels. If it wasn't, like let's say that was perfectly equal, but then it was not reading equal here, well then you would go and you would subsequently adjust the VU meter level. It's separate from the playback level. So perfect, that's all good. So now we've finished our alignment of the playback side. Next comes the slightly more complicated alignment of the recording side. So what do you need to do that? 3 tape types. This is kind of optional because I'm doing this as a professional. Well, I need to calibrate to all available tape types. And I typically use Sony stuff. It's usually pretty good. These Maxells, the XLs I use for the Type 2 because they tend to need a little bit more bias, and it's kind of like covers a bigger range of stuff. But most of the time I'm using Sony. They're new old stock tapes that I have. So you need a Type 1, Type 2, and a Type 4. And through this, I haven't mentioned what my equalization settings are, because these are Type 2 tapes at a 70 microsecond setting. But because I'm going to be now going into a Type 1, I need to select that because on Nakamichi's it is not automatic. So I select Type 1, which is EX, and then I make sure that I'm in the 120 microsecond, and I want, in the case that I have it, the bias tune to be in the center position. So I'm going to put in my Type 1 tape, and I'll reset my counter. So I want to go into record pause mode. So this will now let me switch between tape and source. So I want to go to source. I'm going to fire up 1 kilohertz tone, which right now I have it set to 1 kilohertz. I'm just going to do an amplitude of 1 volt. And now I'm going to adjust this until I get 0 dB on both channels. And you'll see this is monitoring the source. It's a tiny bit off, and that's not uncommon, just differences in the potentiometers and the amplification circuitry. So I'm going to actually use the balance control to make sure those are exactly the same. So I will just tweak them very slightly. The other way, right about there. So now they're perfect. And then I double check. Yep, it's saying 0 dB on the meter. And I know that they are exactly the same on the scope. And now I'm going to go to tape. And again, this is 1 kilohertz at 0 dB. What we're using this for is our level. And also, same as with the calibration tapes on the playback head, we're going to use it to set our head height, but not the azimuth yet. So I'm going to hit play. So now it's in recording. I'm monitoring the tape, and I'm going to watch the scope. And I can see it's close, but it's a little bit off. So I'm going to adjust my head height and get those overlapping. And again, so I am adjusting not the playback head, but the record head. So now I've got them perfectly overlapping. That's great. So again, it's this one on this side, the left side. That's your record head height. And now, oh, hey, look, we're a little bit down. It's not reading 0 dB. Well, on Nakamichi's, it should. It should not be lower. And here's where the next best part of Nakamichi's comes in. Here, these are my level controls. You see there's 6 of them. Left, right, type 1, type 2, type 4. And exactly the same for bias control. I have individual bias controls for both channels and all 3 tape types. That you will not find in anything else. And Nakamichi has this on every model from the BX100 up to the Dragon. Every single Nakamichi, even the basic cheap entry-level ones, have this functionality. So you can calibrate it perfectly. So to adjust the level, I need to determine first, I may get this wrong, and I apologize if I do. Okay, yeah, oh, that's the one. So I'm adjusting the level until I get it right on 0 dB. And in this case, for type 1, it's this first one, and this is the other side. Again, bring it up just so they're matched. And then I'm going to double check on the scope that, yep, amplitudes are the same. So I got them matched on the output and on the VU meter. Okay, so my level is set. Next step, bias. So to do bias, I'm going to go back to source, and I'm going to turn it down a bit. And now I'm going to change my frequency to, no points for guessing, 15 kilohertz. And same as our azimuth adjustment. So now I need to set it to minus 20 dB. So right there. And again, we look at the scope. So that's what we should be seeing. And now we're going to go back to tape. You can see it's getting close there. It's bouncing around a little bit, but that's not terrible. And you can see the output there is pretty good. If I cycle between the source and the tape, you'll see it's only a tiny bit below the actual source. So I will adjust it slightly, but not bad. So again, we're going to go over here to this set of adjusters, and this one is EX. So I'm going to adjust the bias until it's a nice stable minus 20 dB. Do the same for the other channel. Pardon the focus here. Let's see if I can get it to focus properly. Right there. Okay, so now it's a fairly stable. And again, check it on my scope. Looks pretty good. And I'm just going to cycle between the source and the tape. You can see it is really close. And that's what I want. So that is it. Now, I missed a step. If you noticed, I didn't adjust the azimuth on the record head. Well, why not? Because I was looking at the scope and it's perfect. So there is no adjustment needed there. I will deliberately screw it up here just so you can see what you're looking for. So again, we're looking at the 15 kilohertz tone, and if it's off, give me a sec. So yeah, now you can see it's totally off. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust until they're overlapped and at maximum amplitude. You can see like you can get overlap at different points, but there's only one point where the amplitude is at its peak, and you know the height is what I mean by amplitude, and both of them are overlapping perfectly. So that's when your azimuth is bang on. So that's it. That's the mechanical and electrical alignment of any tape deck, but specifically for Nakamichi. The next step would be I'm going to do the exact same procedure with type 2 and type 4. It's identical to what I just did, except, well, then I'm going to be selecting on the front panel type 2, type 4, and then for type 2 and type 4, I'm going to run the 70 microsecond EQ. And again, this is all manual on Nakamichi's. A lot of other tape decks, this is all automatic. Depending on what type of tape you put in, it'll detect and make the adjustments. But that's it. That is your heads perfectly aligned and your playback and record perfectly calibrated. And hopefully, if you know a bit about tape decks, what you're seeing is terms of the separate heads, the adjustability of both heads individually and independently of each other, and the level and bias adjustments that are available on each individual channel and each individual tape type. As well, which I didn't even mention, we can adjust the high frequency response and high frequency peaking through these inductors and these potentiometers here. That's for the 20 kilohertz response. So very high frequency response. It's the level of adjustability that you get in a Nakamichi right out of the box is just unmatched for anything else. So that's why I love them. That's why I recommend them. Even a basic one, like I say, a CR3 is not really anything special in the Nakamichi catalog. Certainly not my favorites, but they work well. They sound good, and they have all the facilities for calibration that you need to perfectly dial in for recording on all tape types. And again, that functionality is available in every single Nakamichi. What would I recommend? Classic transport. So for me, the 3-head classic transports are the best. They sound the best. They give you the best performance. They're really, really well engineered, and they are a huge step above something like this in terms of the parts quality and the build quality, even though functionally they might be very similar. And to the average person, this is more than enough. This is a great deck, even though it's the budget 3-head. And so I don't have anything particularly against the Sankyo transports. They're pretty good. They're easy to fix, but the classic transport NACs are where it's really at. And, so 3-head classic transport, whatever the model, that's like RX505 with the UDAR, ZX5, ZX7, ZX9 are kind of my favorites. The Dragon, naturally, everybody knows that one. The ZX series, like the 670, 680 ZXs, any of the ones that have 3 heads and have tape monitoring. The one caveat, which is a real pisser, is that there are certain Nakamichi 3 heads that do not have tape monitoring. What does that mean? Well, it means that you can't do what I'm doing right now, where you're monitoring the tape in real time while it's recording, which is the whole point of having a 3-head, which is why it is utterly baffling why Nakamichi sold models that had 3 heads that you couldn't monitor. And those are, off the top of my head, 660 ZX is like that. 581 is like that. The 582, I believe, does have monitoring, but the 581 does not. So it's like, if you see those, like, double check. Easy way to tell is they just don't have a button on the front or a switch to actually go between tape and source. But they're almost always way cheaper than other 3-head Nakamichis, which is your first sign that, hey, why is this one only $500 instead of $750 or $1,000? That's why, because they're shit. It's really dumb, and I would never recommend one of those unless you just treat it like a 2-head and you don't care about recording. So anyway, that's my rant and my explanation of why Nakamichis are great, and this process of alignment, which this obviously is a little more in depth in terms of the adjustability we have, but this is the same process that you use for any tape deck. So that's it. It's a little bit more involved if it's a 2-head, because then you have to record, stop, rewind, play it back, see where it is, make a tweak, go back, keep doing that back and forth. Whereas with a 3-head, well, obviously you're just monitoring it in real time while you're making the adjustments. Piece of cake, just takes a few minutes. So that's it. And all you need to do it is some expensive calibration tapes, an oscilloscope, and a signal generator, which I'm sure everybody has. Sorry to be facetious, but that's kind of the minimum to do this right. So anyway, but I hope you see and understand what's involved and what the result is. I mean, you can see it's almost perfect reproduction. 15 kilohertz turn at minus 20 dB on type 1, I should know. This is the shittiest type of tape. No problem. And that's it.